fellow cinephiles, Film Guru here. So I'm continuing on my director retrospective series focusing on Paul Thomas Anderson. So today we'll be looking at There Would Be Blood. This stars Daniel Day-Lewis and Paul Dano and a variety of others. This film takes place starting in 1898 and goes all the way up to 1927. And it looks at Daniel Plainview, played by Daniel Day-Lewis. Prospector, a man trying to make his way in the world, and he ultimately becomes an oil man. And it's about how he goes place to place buying particular pieces of land where there's oil in order to get the oil out of the ground and become quite successful at it. And his partner doing this is his son H.W. Plainview. The bond between these father and son is quite strong, and we get to see how he treats his son and how his son looks up to his father and ultimately wants to become part of that world and become an oil man himself. We're also introduced to Paul Dano's character Eli. He's a young up-and-coming preacher who ultimately wants money to build his church. And when Plainview and Eli come together, it's obviously a clash of wills of what each one actually wants and what they want from these particular deals and what it costs them. Even though Eli's a preacher, Eli and Daniel Plainview are very similar sort of people in a way. They're very driven. They will stop at nothing to achieve their goals, and they will ultimately lie and cheat and do what they have to do in order to get what they want. It really looks at relationships. This is another great example of a Paul Thomas Anderson film where you've got a really interesting and unique character in Daniel Plainview. And Daniel Day-Lewis is absolutely fantastic in this. He embodies this man. He becomes him. We don't see Daniel Day-Lewis anymore. We see Daniel Plainview. And the work and research he's done to prepare for this role and the way he stayed in character with it, he sort of evolved acting in a way and became immersed in this sort of character. And he's just fantastic in here. He's an intense actor. He underplays a lot of scenes. There isn't a lot of dialogue in the movie, and he does so much with just a look. There's one particular sequence where he takes just a look to extremes, where this man has come to him pretending to be his brother, and then he finds out and he gets this look on his face just before he kills his brother. It's just powerful to watch him in this. And you can just see the decisions made on his face and what he decides to do in the film and why the decisions he does make. And you really sort of believe him. You believe this man really existed and he's a real person, not an actor playing a character. All of this film is fantastic, and there's some really great moments in it, but there's 4 sequences that really stand out for me. And the first is the opening. We open up with Daniel Plainview in this sort of hole, and he's digging for granite or whatever he's sort of looking for, and he's sort of in the prospecting phase of his career or his life. And after an accident, he ultimately breaks his leg, and it shows how he gets out of this sort of ditch and well and drags himself into town. You don't actually see him dragging himself into town, you see him dragging himself along the rocks, and then he's in town. But this is a great sequence because it just really shows who this man is, and that he's very driven and what he's capable of. And he's a man of few words, but when he does speak, they're important, what he has to say. And I really love that. I think it's beautifully shot, this sequence. And Tarantino also said that he thought that the opening sequence could have been a whole movie about how he got back to town. And I thought that could have been really interesting as well. But it's just beautifully shot, and it really throws you into the world, and we get immersed in the character and the world we're going to see. And this is a great way to start a film, in my opinion. For the first 15-20 minutes, there isn't a single piece of dialogue. You get every reference and know what's happening just by the reactions of the characters and the actors playing them. It's so brilliant. It reminds me so much of a classic Western in many ways. You've got this sort of mysterious character who doesn't say a lot. He talks when he needs to, and he sort of goes through life trying to achieve what he wants to do. And it's really fascinating to watch. This film is based upon a book called Oil, and it's just how Paul Thomas Anderson brings this film to life. It's just so breathtaking. The other sequences that I really liked, there's a scene where H.W. Plainview, Daniel Plainview's son, he ultimately sends him away, and he feels bad about it because he loses his hearing after an accident, and he doesn't feel he can care for the kid anymore, and he wants to put him somewhere that he might be able to be cared for better than he feels he can care for him. But he feels like he's abandoned him in a way. And there's this sequence with Eli where, in order for Daniel Plainview to put a pipeline and hire this guy's land, he has to go to church and pay penance for his sins, as this man tells him. So he goes there, and ultimately he's put up on stage and kneels down, and Eli just sort of makes him say things, saying he's abandoned his son, I've abandoned my boy, you know, and just tries and makes fun of him in a way and just pushes him around. Daniel puts up with this because he knows that he has to do this in order to get the pipeline going that he needs. And it's just such a powerful scene. The camera's just completely on Daniel Plainview's face and we get to see his reactions to it. And it's so powerful and intense and a really brilliant scene within this film. And there's another scene at the end of the film that mirrors this, where it's ultimately Eli getting his comeuppance in the end. How Eli comes to Daniel for assistance in digging this well. Daniel won't help him unless he announces God and says he's a false prophet. And God is just a whole heap of hocus pocus. And he does this, but what he doesn't know is Daniel's already taken all the oil from there. He just wanted to humiliate this man like he feels like he was humiliated. And he wants to attack him and put him in his place. And this is a really powerful scene, and ultimately he ends up killing Eli with a bowling pin, which is quite a full-on sequence, but really, really well done. And I really loved that. But the single scene that really stood out for me, the one that I really thought was fantastic, is when they've built they've got oil coming out of the ground, they've got this machine digging for it, and all of a sudden there's an explosion. H.W. Plainview, he's up on top of the shack that they've built, and he gets flown back and he loses his hearing. And we get to see the sequences from him losing his hearing and him hearing nothing, which is powerful in itself. But ultimately the oil shoots up and then it catches a light, and this sequence is so beautifully shot. The whole sequence is fantastic, from where the thing explodes to the boy being hurt, to Daniel grabbing him and racing him back to the tent and finding out he's deaf, and then really having to make a decision because the oil rig catches a light and he doesn't know whether to stay with his son or go and put this fire out, and he decides to put the fire out. And this is where there's a disconnection, I feel, between the father and son. And HW really feels this in this particular sequence. Like, his father's sort of abandoning him, but it's not, to me it's not that. He needs to put this fire out. And the whole sequence where he goes out and he cuts the lines and the thing falls over and it slowly goes into black. And there's a beautiful shot of it on fire we get to see. And there's a close-up on his face where he's covered in oil. And we just see the fire flickering in his eyes, and it's fantastic. It's a great tracking shot. The music's fantastic. This is one of the best sequences I think Paul Thomas Anderson has ever really done in a film. And this film was nominated for cinematography, which it was completely deserved because it was so beautifully shot. And that sequence is a great example of how wonderful this film looks and how it was shot to make it look fantastic. There's so many great little performances in it. And Paul Dano, he doesn't give towering performances, but he's very solid, and I really like him. And I like the scenes between him and Daniel Day-Lewis. But the only thing is, Daniel Day-Lewis overshadows him in so many ways. And it's not because he's trying to, it's just, there's something about Daniel Day-Lewis that's, when he's playing this Daniel Plainview character, he's intimidating. He's sort of fearful because you don't know what he might do. And I kind of like that. And even though Paul Dano does the best he can, it's really, Daniel Day-Lewis outshines him in many ways. But when we see his scenes with Paul Dano by himself or in other sequences, he's really fantastic to watch, and he brings his A game to this film, and I really love that. Originally he was only meant to be playing Paul, which is Eli's brother, but the guy who was playing Eli dropped out, so Paul took on both of those, and I think he plays them convincingly different and plays them as twins, and I really love that. The sequence that Paul Dano really owns, in my opinion, besides the sequence where he's humiliating Daniel Plainview in many ways in the church, is a sequence where he's come to Daniel Plainview demanding his money that they haven't received yet. And Daniel just slaps him and pushes him in the mud and slaps mud all over him. And then the next sequence, we cut to Paul Dano and his family, his father and his sisters and his mother having dinner, and the camera's just on his father. Then it slowly pans around and we get to see everyone eating, and then it pans to Paul Dano completely covered in mud with this aggressive and angry look on his face, and he blames his father for Daniel Plainview coming in and taking their oil, not giving the money they want, and he sort of jumps over the table and attacks his father. This sequence is so powerful and brilliantly done, and Paul Dano is fantastic in it and really comes alive in it, and it's just a fantastic sequence. All the actors do a solid job, even the bit part players who appear in the film. And there's just sequences that you know what's going on without dialogue. where he's sitting on the train with his son and he says to his son, I'm going to go and talk to the conductor, and he gets off the train. As he's walking along, the train takes off. His son jumps up to get off the train, and one of Daniel Plainview's friends holds him back. And it's just this sequence where Daniel's walking and the train's behind him, and you just see the kid trying to get off the train. It's such a powerful shot. It really feels like Paul Thomas Anderson knew exactly what he wanted to do with this film, and he made it in the way he wanted to. And I would go as far as to say this is his best film, in my opinion. I think Punch Drunk Love comes very close to it because it's unique and different, but this film really stands alone, and I really love that. From the performances, to the way it's shot, to the writing of it, to the look of it, to the feel of it, to just the way that it's brought to life on screen is just brilliant. Compared to his other films, it's very unique. It isn't so much dialogue driven. It is still character driven, but it's also the landscape becomes another character as well. And I really love that. And I think he's really captured the West in many ways with this film, and it feels like a Western, like I said earlier, because it just feels like, you know, we're in the West. Yes, there are cars and there are things that are a bit different, but it just feels like we're out in the dirt, and you really feel that when you're watching it. You feel like you're out in the plains, in the dirt or whatever, and I love that. I think it's fantastic. And he's really outdone himself with this film, and it really deserved a nomination for cinematography, and this is Daniel Day-Lewis's second Oscar he won for this, which I thought was fantastic. He was so great in this movie in so many ways and outshone everything. I forgot I was watching Daniel Day-Lewis. He was just Daniel Plainview to me, and I thought that was fantastic. I did see an interview regarding this film where they were interviewing Daniel Day-Lewis and Paul Thomas Anderson. Charlie Rose, I think, interviewer was, and they were talking about how they went out and they shot this outside. And it was just refreshing and brilliant, and they enjoyed that. And then they had to do some interior shots, soundstage, and I just didn't feel it was right and realistic or authentic. So they ended up going back out and shooting them in a different way. And I really liked that. It seems to me Paul Thomas Anderson is an experience when he makes a film. It isn't just making a film and getting it out there and that sort of thing. It's an experience. It's experiences he learns from it. It's the friendships and relationships he forms when he makes movies. And the friendship that formed between him and Daniel Day-Lewis is just evident when you see them in interviews together. He brought him to life, Daniel Day-Lewis brought him to life, but it was really the writing that created this character that Paul Thomas Anderson created. And it's just fantastic to see these two together. And I wish they would make another film. They've only done two together, and I know Daniel Day-Lewis is retired, but I would have loved to have seen him work a bit more with Daniel Day-Lewis. He sort of became his Philip Seymour Hoffman sort of working partner, and I really loved that. Anyway, the next film I'll be looking at in his catalogue is Phantom Thread, and that's the last film he's done so far. When he produces another film, I'll obviously review that as well, but that will be the last film I do on these reviews. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you're enjoying this director retrospective series. I hope to do many more of these sort of videos. So if you did enjoy these videos, please hit subscribe down the bottom, follow me on Facebook and Twitter. Otherwise, until next time, enjoy the movies.